YouTube channel where you can access more than 30 past sessions at any time, day or night. There is a link to our YouTube channel at the end of today's slide deck. Before we get into the material of today's presentation, a few housekeeping instructions. Number one, we have automatically muted your audio to help us control the sound quality of the presentation. If you are new to using Zoom, welcome. We have found that the Zoom for Government platform can be very intuitive and user-friendly. You can customize your view with the different pods as you see fit. Speaking of, you will see there is a chat pod as well as a Q&A area. For this session, please use the chat pod for any administrative or logistical questions, or if you have to report any issues that you are experiencing and one of our Client Enrichment Series team members can assist you. We ask that any questions you have relevant to today's material be posted in the Q&A pod. We will address some questions at intervals during today's presentation, and the remainder will be answered at the end of the presentation as a whole, or answered on our website after the presentation. For the folks who are participating by telephone only today and following along with the slide deck, you can participate in the Q&A by emailing your questions and comments to us via our mailbox, clientenrichmentseries@gsa.gov. And we'll make sure to add them to our question list. Any questions that we are unable to get to today will be noted, and all questions will be answered and posted on our website, gsa.gov/CES. Closed captioning is also available for today's session, and instructions were sent out with the slide decks, and we will post a link to that service in the chat panel. Open that link and view the captions side by side with your Zoom screen if you so wish. Today's presentation will be led by Ryan Dorfler. Ryan assists federal agencies in identifying workplace arrangements that support employee work practices and achieve agency business goals. His past client agencies include FAA, HHS, and DHS. Ryan also teaches a workplace strategy class called Leading Workplace Engagements, as well as development tools and publications that GSA employees and other federal agencies can use to further their workplace programs. His most recent tool is a workplace investment and feasibility modeling tool known as WIFM. Today, we are spending 90 minutes on the elements of workplace engagement. The objectives for today's covered material will include things like what makes an effective workplace, current and future offerings for workplace engagement, the Workforce 2030 program, and concepts of change management in a post-pandemic environment. Now I will turn it over to our presenter, Ryan. You have the floor, sir.
Great, thank you, Victor. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, as Victor mentioned, I'm going to be talking about a few different workplace services that GSA is offering, as well as just talking about some of the new efforts that we're investigating right now. But before I do that, though, I want to provide a bit of context as about our services. When we think about the evolution of the workplace and how it's changed over time, one of the things that we realize is that not only has it changed as far as like the furniture and the layout and the experience, but certainly where that work can be accomplished. I mean, before technology really could accommodate us, we were pretty much had to work in just one location. Even back in the early 2000s when we had telework centers or working from home, it was pretty much an assignment type of base where you're either working at one location or the other. And that eventually ended up growing where later on, and certainly throughout the 2000s, technology allowed us greater freedom on where we work and when we work. What we found because of the pandemic, though, is that it really increased our ability to leverage technology, to collaborate and virtually, as well as have discussions like this, which formerly, like in the early 2000s, we would have had to do it in person or even just by audio, and certainly not by video. One of the things that we are discovering now as we look to the future and what the new workplace could be is we now have all of these options available to us. And we can work anywhere, and we can a lot of times work asynchronously or choose when we work. But all those options do create some challenges as well as far as which of these options would be right for an organization. Or for my organization, or as a leader, which one would I choose amongst all of these options that are available to us to ensure that my organization it successfully accomplishes its mission? Lots of opportunities available to us, and certainly some challenges as far as identifying which options, workplace strategies that an organization should pursue. One thing that we always look to when GSA provides its services, workplace consulting services, to its clients, is taking a step back and say, okay, what creates an effective workplace? What are the facets or variables, if you will, that we need to consider when GSA provides workplace strategy advice to its clients? Certainly, it comes down to, as far as the space itself, the layout of the space, how adjacencies and those kinds of things. Certainly, as far as like the building, maybe the building amenities, where it's located in a city or a community. And as we know, as we think back when we used to be in offices a lot more, the furniture, how well is the furniture performing, any equipment that may be needed, as well as maybe support services as well. Over the last 2 years, what we found is that technology has become increasingly critical to be able to successfully accomplish our work. And certainly being able to connect with others and making sure, as far as the organization culture, how we connect with each other as far as getting our day-to-day work done, all of these different variables we look at when we provide our workplace services and offer our strategies. Taken collectively and looking at it holistically, it really allows us to provide what we think are cogent recommendations to our clients. Now, the other thing that we need to also remember is that the workplace can certainly impact an individual's health and wellness. A couple different ways we can do that is physiological. We know that from lighting, for instance, and certainly indoor air, the ergonomics of the chair, that certainly has some very real repercussions as far as how an individual is feeling or experiencing that workplace. Socially, as far as how do individuals interact with each other, either formally or informal. Also, just as investment in the workplace, as far as what does the individuals feel that the organization is, how much do they care about the individuals as far as what's going on around them. Other aspects pertain to the spiritual aspects of the health and wellness of the individual, and of course, mental and emotional as well. All of these different variables, as well as the intellectual one at the bottom there, contribute, the workplace impacts that for employees, for leaders, and pretty much anybody that's accomplishing work at that location. So what we're going to do now is we're going to break things up a bit. We got a couple poll questions for everybody. And the first poll question Victor is going to put on the screen is this one. Which of these aspects do you feel is most important for your organization to pursue for the post-pandemic workplace? And what you should see pretty soon is a poll up on the screen. Victor, unfortunately, I can't see that. Is already up for everybody?
I believe that if you click the polls pod at the bottom of your screen, you will be able to see it, or it should appear on your screen automatically. If there's anyone who is having issues seeing that or anything like that, please post it in the chat.
There it is.
There we go.
So I'm going to ask everyone to go ahead and choose which of these aspects do you feel, you can only pick one, you feel would be most important for your organization to pursue in the post-pandemic workplace. And while you're doing that, just as a reminder to everybody, please go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A pod. And what we're going to do is, as we do other polls like this throughout the session, Victor is going to bring up those questions as we get to it. As the poll is happening, what I'm going to do, Victor, if it's okay, is just go ahead and keep going on the slides. Would that be all right?
Yeah, go right ahead. When it looks like people have put in all their answers, would you like me to discuss?
Yes, please. Yeah. What are we seeing as the results?
Right now we are seeing. There we go. Right now we are seeing just about half of our attendees saying that mental and emotional is the most important aspects they want to see workplace organizations pursuing in a post-pandemic environment. The next two after that are social and physiological. So it does seem to be workplaces that are facilitating good mental and physical health, as well as the ability to socialize again as we move back into offices.
That's wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the poll. What we're going to do now is we're just going to go ahead and move it ahead. There we go. And so just by this very brief discussion that we have, and it sounds like from your poll responses as well, is, I mean, our perspective in GSA, and when we provide our services to our client agencies and looking at different ways of work and considering coming up with recommendations, if you will, of different workplace strategies. What we want to make sure is the strategies that we feel your organization should pursue to create an effective workplace at the same time addresses those aspects that we just covered in the poll with regards to individuals' health and wellness. The question that we continually ask ourselves as we do these, what we call engagements and provide these services, is how can we create a workplace that promotes a diverse and resilient organization? I mean, certainly there's a couple different ways we can look into that, but resiliency is certainly a big one, as we've learned from this pandemic, as far as being flexible, providing different opportunities for individuals to accomplish their work, also helps the organization become healthier overall. Now, in order to help answer this question, as far as just to go back real briefly, it's like, how can we create that workplace? Or at least offer recommendations to our clients to, as far as what we think the steps that they should take to achieve this. Is one thing that we've looked at is, okay, let's talk with our clients as far as what does the future hold, or what do they think the future holds as far as the future of work, or at least what things should we consider as we investigate this. What you see there are the seals and logos from a variety of different agencies that we've consulted at the national level over the last year and a half or so to investigate these possibilities as far as what are some trends that we can anticipate in the future, as well as to collect information to help inform future offerings that GSA can provide you as well, which I'll cover towards the end of the presentation. Some of the major themes that we've heard from them is that distributed work can be trusted work. And what you'll see is a bit more of elaboration there below in the text. But the big themes is distributed work is trusted work. There is a greater interest in sharing space. We've heard that from a number of our clients, in that it's not just the sharing of space, such as workstations or offices that you might see in a co-working or a space as a service type of offering, but it's also the potential for sharing space in special space or mission critical space, such as SCIFs or laboratories and those kinds of things. There's definitely some interest there, and it's certainly something that GSA wants to investigate with our clients. One thing we've also heard is that distributed work, allowing choice, individuals to have some choice as far as where they can work, whether it's in their home or in the office or in a different completely geographic location as well. Though what it is an enticement for as recruiting new talent, as well as retaining the employees that you have as well. Another theme that we heard is, even though we have all this going on, as far as a lot of people wanting to work from home more, there is still a place for the office environment. However, that role could change. Maybe it's much more about collaboration and less about doing heads down, what we call heads down, individual or solo type of work, which could be easily done at home as well. There are also some benefits associated with distributed work that I've covered already. Things as far as resiliency and flexibility in the organization, but as well as creating flexibility for the individual as well to accomplish their work and maintain that healthy work-life balance, if you will. But amongst all of this, and it's one of my first slides, is there's a lot of choices out there. Which one is right for you or for your organization, and how do we get there and successfully implement that? There's certainly some challenges that need to be addressed as well that we need to take into account. One big one is ensuring that regardless of what happens, as far as that new workplace, is that the individual, your employees, you as leaders, whomever in your organization partakes on this workplace journey, if you will, is that there is still a healthy sense of a work-life balance there. So if someone's working from home full-time, there isn't the expectation that they have to be working all the time. as well. Along those lines, this is what some of the things that we've heard from our clients over the last year and a half. What we've also heard from many of our consulting partners, many of the firms that you see here, some of them you see here with regards that we use and we contract with them to provide many of these workplace consulting services, is we ask very much the same question. It's kind of, what are the things we should anticipate in the future, and what things should we at least think about as possibly coming? Some of the things that we've heard is, first, telework is here to stay. Remote work, we can't put the genie back in the bottle as far as what it was before the pandemic. A lot of people have experienced telework in different ways, or remote work in different ways, many times very successfully. And reverting back or expecting that we're going to go back to the way that it used to be, in my personal opinion, is a bit unrealistic, because many of these employees that have been enjoying, or individuals that have been enjoying working from home and feeling very productive, to basically dramatically change that and having them come back into the office full time, that's going to create some certain anxiety, if you will, or differences of expectations. However, at the same time, people still want to come together. We can't be just agoraphobic, if you will, just staying at home the entire time. And many individuals, including myself, definitely have a longing, if you will, to be able to meet with my peers, to collaborate on things, which would be much more effective doing in person, as well as reconnecting on an interpersonal level. Now, amongst all of this, one of the things that is going to be increasingly the center of attention is the organization's culture. As individuals become more distributed, organizations become more, teams become more distributed as compared to each other, there needs to be some sort of glue that keeps that overall agency or overall business line still operating efficiently and effectively, and that's culture. And that's something that in every workplace engagement that we provide, the services we provide, we always recommend that a certain investigation in that aspect of the workplace. Now, workplaces change, right? As far as how people do their work change. Certainly technology has forced us, well, and many times in a positive way, to change how we do work as well, such as video discussions like this. And so part of the new workplace is really looking at those changes and doing a continual feedback loop as far as what's working well, what's not working well, and how we can fix it. One thing that we're also discovering is, because of the importance of technology and distributed work and those types of things, is it does create a bit more flexibility on workplace strategy experiments, if you will. Before the pandemic and much earlier before that, is that we were pretty much, some organizations were hesitant to try different ways of working or reconfiguring the office in different ways, because they were afraid that, okay, we're going to be stuck with this until our occupancy changes or lease changes or that kind of thing. And so that creates a certain conservative outlook, if you will, or as far as being more reluctant to try more radical looking at approaches to workplace. If we take away as far as it has to happen in the office and consider the workplace as anywhere that you can accomplish your work, not necessarily the workplace being the office, what that also does is create new opportunities for experimentation as far as different ways of working. And so that's just something to think about in the back of your mind. While we're considering this and looking at, as far as considering things like remote work and space sharing and different attracting new talent to and retaining our talent that we already have to our agencies, companies are doing the same as well. And so as we look at the new workplace, we need to also recognize, particularly for those agencies that need to hire a significant number of personnel in a very short period of time, that workplace could be a way of drawing individuals to come to your agency, particularly those that maybe said, well, I'm going to take a break from working because of what's been going on the last few years. And amongst all this, and this is going to be kind of a reoccurring theme that you're going to be hearing from me, is that there are no simple answers. I've gotten the request before. So it's like, do you have benchmarking data? And my response is, it's like, well, benchmarking data before 2019 really doesn't provide much useful information, because everything is different, or a lot of it is different anyway. We have a lot more opportunities, a lot more ways, different ways of looking at things, and relying on just some benchmark information from even 4 years ago or 5 years ago is really going to limit the your view or some of as far as evaluating what kind of possibilities might exist. The important thing amongst all of this is if you're thinking about a new workplace or as far as different ways of working or how your employees accomplish that work or when they accomplish that work, the main thing is to kind of look within the organization, try and learn from the experiences of the pandemic, and then think about how can we create this new workplace from anew versus relying on the references of how work used to be in the office 5 years ago or so. So at this time, I'm going to offer a few personal thoughts and maybe as far as what the future might hold, or something, maybe one possibility, if you will, is one of them is as organizations embrace distributed work, trusted work, because it is trusted work, look at different ways of working, individuals working a bit more asynchronously or coming together, is that really changes the role of the physical workplace, whether it's at home, at a co-working site, or in the office as well. Office space will become much more centered around collaboration and maintaining those social connections and work connections and being as a way of fostering the cultural growth, if you will. Because for speaking personally as myself, if I'm going to do heads down work like preparing these slides for today, I'm not going to go into a busy environment and do that. Why would I want to do that when I can just as easily and maybe even more effectively do it at home? So if you remove that aspect of the work from, or a good chunk of it from the office space, what that does is reposition the role of the office space as serving something a bit different. The other one is as we start breaking up these functions across these different spaces, is that it does create also opportunities for spaces to be shared within agencies, for instance, within an agency across bureaus or within a bureau across business lines, as well as maybe applying a co-working model of reservation or space as a service, but in the context of just that organization. As well as also providing sharing space across agencies as well. And by that, I mean not just workstations and offices, but also exploring the possibility of sharing special mission critical spaces as well. There's certainly going to be more choices of where and when work is done. And when as being, maybe I'm here in Seattle on the West Coast, and many of my colleagues are in the East Coast and across the country, and I find myself, and I'm sure them as well, working asynchronously more, but making sure that we have room on our calendars to connect when we need to and collaborate on things. And certainly technology is going to be more important than space in the future. What we're finding now, and one of my fears for this presentation is like, what if the Wi-Fi goes out, or the camera doesn't work, or the laptop freezes, or I got a massive update happening on Windows, which happened this morning, coincidentally. It's those kinds of things that it reminds us that now technology is just as important as space and furniture and the other things when it comes to an effective work environment. So if it's that important, that should also be part of the consideration and really the calculation of a return on investment for the workplace as its role of allowing organizations to accomplish their missions. Overall, assigned space is going to be much less. And by assigned, I mean those that are dedicated to your organization, for instance, like on an occupancy agreement, for instance. The amount of space you use may be the same. Maybe some of that space is an individual working from home. Maybe some of that space is being shared across with other agencies, and maybe GSA has a role in facilitating that space sharing. But there is going to be a balance of space, some space that's going to be assigned to your organization. But my prediction is it's not going to be nearly as much as you might have had maybe a couple of years ago. And then the last one is one of the things we were looking at, and we have discussions about this internally as well, is how do you measure the new workplace? I mean, many of you use utilization rate as a metric for space efficiency. Well, what does that look like now if a lot of people are working from home and the role of that office space up in number one above has changed? How do you measure that? And maybe a different metric is needed to look at flexibility. and its contribution to the resilience of the organization, those kinds of things. So these are the types of things that I think personally will be happening more and more for the federal community. And we got another poll question here for you, is which of these things, so my personal predictions, which of these do you think will happen before the year 2030? And you're going to hear 2030 a bit. We have an initiative called Workplace 2030 as a vision, as a way of thinking about what could our workplace be like in the future. And we just sort of, let's look at 10 years in the future, and let's think about what are the things that we need to do to get there, and what are the things we need to think about to get there, and those kinds of things. So with that, go ahead, you got a poll up there right now. And those numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 correspond to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the screen. And go ahead, you should be able to pick as many as you want. And then we'll give it, while we're waiting for everyone to poll, I'm gonna ask Victor again, do we have any questions from our audience?
Yes, we do.
Excellent.
And there's some pretty short order ones, so very easy to answer. So
Okay.
Janet asks, define distributed work. Is that just another term for telework?
Distributed work, when we think about organizations, telework is certainly a part of that. Distributed work is where if you have an organization, let's say it's a 10-person team, a good example would be the group that I'm with, the Center for Workplace Strategy. I live in Seattle. My boss is in Washington, D.C. His boss is in Chicago. Many of my peers are all over Austin, in Colorado, all over the country, and up in New England, all over the country. So for us, we are a distributed organization because we are not all concentrated at one particular location, or serve, all have to go into that one office, if you will, for instance, at our headquarters at 1800 F Street. And telework is certainly a part of that in order for us to be able to work. But a bigger part of that, telework is sort of the act of being able to accomplish your work on your own. But a bigger part of that is the expectations, the processes, our team culture that allows us to work together and not just do a bunch of solo work individually and not talking to each other. So distributed work is a bit more than just telework. And hopefully I answered your question there.
Yeah. The next question is actually pretty relevant to the current poll question. And this is from Heidi. She asks, in light of COVID, will office sharing continue? Many people will be concerned about how clean the space might be after it is used.
Yeah, certainly that is a consideration. Our hope, of course, is that I'm not sure where it is, and as far as across the country, here in Seattle, the curves are going down in a positive way as far as cases and hospital, but it's certainly going to be in the back of our mind, right? And that's something as we look at space sharing, whether it's sharing co-working space of workstations or co-working space of special spaces, getting a keen understanding of potential demand for that space would have to certainly be part of that. And what influences demand is certainly what the individual's expectations are as far as how safe it is to come back into the office, to be around people, how close am I as an individual to another person, how the cleaning procedure, all of those kinds of things certainly would be things that we would consider or at least investigate as we develop these new offerings. Yes. All right.
We have most of the answers from the poll questions available now. And it looks like people are saying most likely before the year 2030, we will see number 4. Technology will become much more important than space, but it's closely followed by options 3 and then options 5. More choices on where and when work is done, and overall assigned space needs will be much less.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to close this on my screen, and thank you everybody for filling that out. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to actually talk about the service. Not enough predictions and like this is what the future holds, or pull out the crystal ball or the 8 ball and shake it. What's going to happen in the future? What I want to do now is really talk about how GSA can really help you navigate all of these different variables, if you will. One of the first things is here's one of those types of charts, which shows, okay, the earlier that you go in, as far as thinking about change and the impact of change in the pre-design, your ability to impact costs at the green line is very high, and the cost of accomplishing those changes is very low. And as many of us know, basically the intent of this is that the later on you go in the process, the project delivery process, things are getting constructed, or even after occupancy, your ability to make changes to the workplace, to try different things out, certainly it goes down, but the cost of doing things goes up quite a bit. Now, all of the services that we offer as it relates to workplace strategy, feasibility assessments. The next thing I'm going to cover is a tool that will help you do that. Change management. It's all about starting early as possible, even before where that start here is at, going, like, if I could pull over, make the green go pre-design, if you will. And if you're even thinking about, or even just want to consider, it's like, what individuals want to work from home, how much do they want to do that? And you're asking yourself that question, we can help you investigate that. Our ability to provide sound recommendations really depends on us providing these services, again, as early as possible. Now, one of the tools that we have, and actually I think I did a CES session on this a year or so ago, is something called the WIFM tool. WIFM for short. It's a bit of a mouthful, the full name. It's a workplace investment and feasibility modeling tool, but the acronym is a bit catchy. What this tool is it allows you, it's basically an Excel file with a lot of background calculations that you can get for free, and it's something I could just email to you, and then I'll provide some instructions on how that works. But what it allows you to do is you put in some basic information about your current space, and allows you to manipulate different types of workplace strategies. And what you end up seeing is, and you can run scenarios side by side, and what you see is at the space calculations overall, as well as a very rough order of magnitude cost estimate with regards to tenant improvement costs, furniture costs, technology costs, and those kinds of things. It is a bit daunting, the user interface, and we are going through a bit of an upgrade to make it much more elegant than what it is right now. But what I am going to do is I'm going to zoom in on certain sections where you can see what some of the features are. You can run scenarios side by side, 3 of them side by side, but you can also, in each of those scenarios, choose from 3 different scenario scopes. And each of those scopes, you can, so if you want to say, what if I stayed in one place and I didn't move, and I demolished everything and built it anew versus going to a brand new location, you can compare those side by side. Again, very rough, think order like plus or minus 25%, if you will. It seems like a huge swing, but it is really good if you need to see different strategies will enable you to achieve whatever space goals that you have. Whether it is the old-fashioned utilization rate per person, or you need to shrink down your footprint by a certain percentage. The different scenarios that are included is, the first one is if you were staying in place, you can just swap out the workstations, and all of the hard-walled spaces to stay there. The other scenario is that, let's say you take away all the offices and the meeting rooms and you create them again, recreate them, but your special spaces such as a server room, for instance, stay intact. And the last scenario is if you move to a completely different location. What's also taken into account as WIFM is you can look at the impacts, positive impacts of co-location. So you can look at 3 different locations, regardless of geographic area, and see if there's space savings that can be achieved there. In the cost calculations, it covers a bunch of things, both refreshing and creation of the new space. Lots of details, I can go on and on about this. But what I want to do is that you can change desk sharing ratios, workstation office sizes. In some of the scenarios, you can even add a workstation and another office type. And you can also, in these same other scenarios, select from different bundles of support spaces. And all of these automatically, in real time, generates the space calculations, as well as comparisons to any utilization rate goals that you have, as well as showing the delta that needs to be gapped. If you need to shave off some space to achieve your goal, it calculates that for you. And it will also calculate, again, rough order of magnitude, the overall cost of implementing that space change. One of the nice things about WIFM is that it is built for customization. Part of that is if you have a way of calculating utilization rate a certain way, we can change that. If you have your own furniture contracts, and you know exactly how much the furniture costs, you can change that as well. Furniture types, all those kinds of things we can very easily change for you. If you want to do more robust changes, again, this is just an Excel file, we can crack it open and make some more robust changes as well. Admittedly, it does not take into account the financial costs associated with co-working or the WeWork type space, if you will, and that's something that will be included in the next version of the tool. So it really rounds out as far as the different ways of working and different locations of working and the total cost associated with that. Now, to get a copy of this, all you gotta do is send an email to workplace@gsa.gov, or you can send me an email directly at ryan.dorfler@gsa.gov. I'll send you that. We'll schedule a 90-minute tutorial because there's some things related to inputting data and that kind of stuff that we should walk through. And then we can also talk about if you're interested at whatever point that you want, we can also talk about further customization so it works better for your agency. Now, that's something that's free that I can get to you immediately, and it doesn't cost your agency a dime. Now, there's other services that we can certainly offer for you at a reimbursable basis. And this is really the robust workplace engagement services. Again, thinking about the different facets of what we would consider go into an effective workplace, there's lots of benefits that go into that as when we think about all those different things. As far as resiliency, knowledge transfer, well, you can read all of those on the right. But when we do our workplace strategies to provide our services, one of the things that we like to do is always go back to one of our publications or use the methodologies that are articulated in this activity-based planning publication, which I do remember doing a CES session on, I believe, last year, and you can find a direct link to the publication there. Lots of details on the approach and what it entails and what it could mean to you as far as investigating workplace possibilities. Now, overall, the approaches we always want to do is make sure our workplace engagements connect to your business goals, connect to or at least appreciate the different ways of working. Some people or some of our consultants call it as personas. You may have heard we use patterns, work profiles. They're all basically the same thing, looking at how people could do their work and coming up with a categorization system to analyze it in a bit more efficient manner. What we also do is make sure we connect to collect different perspectives, both from the leadership and employees, and analyze multiple strategies also. From the business goal perspective, what we want to do is get a really good understanding of what your business goals are, not real estate, business goals, your mission goals. What makes your organization tick? What are the goals that your leadership is losing sleep over as far as achieving or not achieving? And then what we do is when we understand those, we begin to identify workplace impacts associated with that. We use an approach where we use the modified balanced scorecard approach, and we divide those goals up into financial, business process, customer, and people. Many consultants or you may see other organizations dividing it up differently. Again, it's all of different ways of achieving the same goal, creating a connection between the workplace strategies and the goals that the workplace is intended to help you achieve. To help provide an example, what I'm going to do is focus on just the people goal. And what you'll see there in the blue, some example goals, maybe an organization has some example workplace strategies and some more specific tactics. Maybe it's enabling a spirited community. Maybe a goal is about for supporting flexible working. And maybe a goal is also about attracting or retaining talent. And maybe a strategy or a tactic to accomplish that would be creating a variety of different workplaces, all the things that I just talked about. So what I'm going to do is we've got one more audience interaction. This one might be a bit easier. What we're going to do is we've got a little poll question. And this one, what I'd like to do is everyone go ahead and go to your chat and imagine yourself as a workplace strategist. And the goal is attracting and retaining talent. What might some other workplace strategies that would be good to help an organization attract and retain talent? And what we're going to do is I'm going to keep going in the interest of time as everyone puts their ideas in the chat. And then what we're going to do is when we get done at a certain point, I'm going to ask Victor to read off some of these chats that may pop up, some of the really interesting ones. So again, go ahead, put your ideas in the chat. What are some other workplace strategies that could attract or retain talent? And so what I'm going to keep going is the other thing that we do is make sure that our workplace strategies connect to how individuals do their work. An approach that we use, it's also in that activity-based planning publication, is what we do is we look at where the work is accomplished. Basically, we divide it up into 3 different categories. Is the individual mainly working as a position when the pandemic lifts and everyone's can work as far as going back to the office safely? Well, in that position, is that something where they would likely accomplish their work at a desk, or would they be somewhere in the office, or would they be working a lot more at home or even full-time at home? So we want to understand that based off of the different types of work positions. What we also want to do is get an understanding of when they're in the office space, is would they be, what type of activities would be accomplished either at their desk or interacting with others, interactive or concentrated? Are they going to be doing heads down work? And we use these, we call them like buckets, if you will, or categories or work patterns, basically 6 different perspectives of work. And it aligns with each of these work patterns. And to give you an example, what we do is we use this to help identify which types of workplace elements or features or provisions are right for, we think would be right for an organization. You have a variety of different spaces, and thinking of the office space, maybe in your neighborhood. If you've been back to the office, maybe you got focus rooms, workstations, maybe a non-dedicated desk. You see a couple of them there. Maybe elsewhere on the floor that's shared with other organizations. Maybe elsewhere in the building that's shared with other organizations or maybe other agencies. And certainly outside of the building, working from home or using a co-working site. What GSA does is we use that work pattern approach, or we use approaches provided by our consultants as well, long as they look at how to categorize mobility and the type of work being done, to say, okay, in this instance, we have some positions or personnel, they're out of the office a lot, but when they do come in the office, they're going to spend their time interacting with others. And we would say, of that mix of spaces, we think this one might be right for this particular organization based off of how they do their work. Once we identify that, then we build up from them and say, okay, here are the features that we need to make sure we take into account. Here's the organizational dynamics that may be a result from that, all those types of things. And how does these individuals work with other individuals that may have a very different work pattern? All of that's included in our recommendations. To get that information and to come up with those recommendations, what we do is we want to make sure we connect with both the leadership, as far as the frontline leaders, not just the real estate leaders, but the ones that are accomplishing and leading the organization to accomplish the mission, and go through these questions and a whole bunch more to understand what's going on and where that organization is headed. But we also want to hear from all of the staff, as much of the employees as well, to get their perspective at the same time. And the way that we do that is we use a variety of different research tools, if you will, to collect both quantitative and qualitative information that allow us to give us as complete of a picture as possible. Now, these tools, we'll mix and match them, we'll customize them depending on the size of the project, the goals of the engagement, what the client agency wants to investigate. But some of the common goals that we use or tools that we use are something called a visioning session, which is essentially leaders coming together in a focus group to talk about what the future may hold for the agency or that organization and how the workplace could possibly help them out. We may also do one-on-one interviews with business line leaders to get their own, understand their own particular slice, if you will, of that bigger pie of how their particular business line contributes to the common good of that agency. From an employee perspective, certainly surveys is something that we like to use to collect a bunch of information in an efficient manner. And I'll show some sample results of that in a moment. We do employee focus groups, and I'll show an example of that. And then what we also do for a third-party perspective, When we start coming back to the office, even though many of us maybe haven't been into the office in a while, certainly there's some value in looking at the space as far as remember that special space. Do you really need that much more, or has your work changed over the last couple of years? Walking through the space, understanding how space is used, understanding how resources are used. And this last one, access data evaluation, it's a mouthful, which basically says, let's look at the data that tells us how our resources used. Maybe it's about technology. Maybe it's about VPN. How well is the VPN working, and is there a lot of drop-offs? Or maybe it's key card data, whatever. All of this, as much information as we can get, we digest that, we analyze that, we'll pick and choose, we'll kind of identify which of these, pick and choose which research tools will be the best way to collect that information, given the size of the project and of course our client's budget as far as providing these services. And then what we do is then we come up with recommendations off that. Now, what's neat about this is the recommendations we provide, all of this is leading to workplace strategy recommendations like office layouts or working from home and how to support working from home. But the data itself is also really useful for the organization to do their own internal policy changes. So as an example here, we have an employee survey, pre-occupancy survey, if you will. And this is like a sample chart of collaboration and communication. But what I'm going to show you is actually some real data from a real agency that I'm working with right now. And we ask questions related to how does working from home compare to working in the pre-COVID times? Like, you're working from home now, from what you remember before, is it better or worse related to various different activities, ranging from taking conference calls to going down to staying up to date on what others are working on, those kinds of things. And you probably intuitively say, well, yeah, some of these are doing great now from home, but some of these not so great. And then give you an idea is what we're finding with this particular client is things on conference calls, avoiding distractions, all that solo type of work, or the things that you can do on a speakerphone like I'm doing right now, is much easier and more effective to do at home versus going into an office and maybe disturbing others. Being creative really just kind of depends on how an individual works, but staying connected and collaborating with others, there's certainly some challenges associated with that. And that goes into the nature of office space possibly changing to support that, and really providing what we call hybrid meetings, where you have some people in person, some people on video, making sure everyone that's participating in that meeting has an equitable work meeting experience, if you will. So this is the type of data that you can get by just from the survey itself. And I'm sure maybe some of this would be useful for you. What I'm going to do now is go through some examples when we do our focus groups. Is the focus groups—
Brian, if I may.
Yes, please.
If I may interject, can we circle back to the answers to the questions on how to retain new talent? No, you're fine. You're fine. So we actually have quite a variance of answers. Some sounding like easier ideas, like complimentary drinks and snacks, higher pay, and then others that are getting more into the nitty gritty of how GSA and other agencies might run themselves. Okay. One suggestion is relaxing the policy that only allows people to work between 6:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. Maybe more flexible telework hours, an on-site gym, more recognition for accomplishments, federal student loan forgiveness that accounts for a certain fraction of loans at the end of the year, as well as some things that you have already addressed here, like new spaces that allow you to kind of focus on that head down work, focus work, and again, a more generous telework policy. So again, kind of contributing to that idea where the future is definitely going to have more telework, and maybe re-examining some of the current rulings and restrictions on that would be useful for attracting new clients as well as pleasing current employees.
Great, that is fantastic. And Victor, you broke me off. I know I was just going on and on. I'm glad you interjected, because this is a perfect segue into like all 134 or 133. Oh, we lost somebody. 133 people that are on joining us right now. Congratulations. You all went through a real quick mini mega focus group, and just trying to get a bunch of information from other people. We also do focus groups of leaderships and employees through things like Miro and Mural, I think is another one. Basically allowing individuals to try express themselves and their perspectives using more visual means. Like here, what you see here is what we call a culture card. Images on a screen, individuals using Miro can go in there and place their sticky dot to help express, this is where I think our current culture is at. And then we use that information in the virtual focus group to narrow down, okay, which of these images we think which of these images the participants felt best express their current culture. And then we identify themes from those to come up with recommendations. This is just one example of how GSA uses whiteboarding type of technology to get virtual collaboration and focus groups. So that way we don't have to all wait till we can all come, be together in person to do this. And this is an example of some of the goals that might come out of that type of focus group. So we use each of these, all these tools are available to us. And again, we pick and choose which ones depending on the size of the project or the type of engagement or the aspects of the workplace or organization that we want to investigate. But what we also do is, as we do this and we look at this information, is make sure we're considering all of the strategies that are available now, as well as strategies that we plan on having available to all of you over the coming months. As part of that evaluation, we go back to the circle here of an effective workplace. We look at all of these different things ranging from workspace, real estate, furniture, technology, business processes, and the performance of individuals, and of course, health and wellness, and those other aspects that we did our poll question on earlier. And then our deliverables can cover a bunch of different things related to each of those different aspects of an effective workplace. Some of these you see here, and I'll just highlight this. Don't worry, I'm not going to read all the bullets. But from the workspace perspective, you see some of the more classic design deliverables that come out of it. From real estate, it actually could be looking at your portfolio and maybe how your real estate portfolio could change, depending on how your need for office space changes or maybe increased adoption or radically increased adoption of working from home. We can investigate that as well. Certainly furniture and looking at different furniture options. One thing about the furniture is that we do have an offering coming down and later on the fiscal year that deals with furniture and technology for those that are working from home and making it much easier for agencies to order those in a way that's compliant with your own particular agency's rules as far as what's the right kind of technology, a laptop, for instance, that an employee should have. Certainly technology considerations are included. What we always do, regardless of the scope of engagement, is we always take a look at business processes and again, human performance as far as what are some ways that the organization or things that the leadership should consider to improve how the organization operates and the role of the workplace in achieving that. Here are some examples of some of these deliverables. I'm sure many of you have seen these before. The classic is sort of like, as when it comes to office space, and as far as like team spaces and sample images and floor layouts and those kinds of things, team adjacencies, those kinds of things as well. What we do is we make sure for those organizations that are distributed is making sure that our focus isn't just on the office space, but also what type of, how does that distributed organization operate? And are there other considerations as well? Now, another thing that we do is also provide it for those as far as GSA providing your space or not, as far as calculating how much space you're gonna need, office space, and the type of space that is. We also use a variety of different space calculation tools. This is just a snippet of one, what we call a work pattern space calculation tool, basically a mouthful that just says it's an Excel tool for calculating your space based off of how individuals accomplish their work. This is another Excel tool or file that you can have for free. Just like for WIFM, uses a lot of the same type of interface. What's nice about it is there's some embedded logic in there. So based off of which of the types of work patterns, like let's say a contracting officer or a law enforcement officer or whatever, how they do their work and where they do their work, this tool will automatically recommend a mix of support spaces to support those individuals. Again, this is a tool that you can receive. Just send an email to workplace@gsa.gov or to myself directly at workplace or ryan.dorfler@gsa.gov, And just like with them, I'll send you a copy and we'll have a quick tutorial about how it works. And this can also be customized for you as well. We'll address those customization features when we walk through the tool. Now, another thing that we also provide is, I've been talking about work patterns a bit. Again, you may hear personas or work styles, all basically the same thing, looking at how individuals do their work and where they do their work and when they do their work. But that data can be really useful on its own. It can guide management decisions. It can guide telework policy changes. It can guide a lot or inform changes in a variety of different other policies that GSA wouldn't normally be involved with. So if you're just interested in the data, like from a survey, reach out to me as well. Again, and you can do that at workplace@gsa.gov. In many instances, those surveys that we provide, we can also provide those to you at no cost. And the reason being is we benefit from the data as well. And also we have those as templates, so it's pretty easy for us to set those up and get those out for you. It does require some setup as far as organizations and position titles, those kind of things. All details that I'd be happy to discuss with you at a time when we have a bit more time to go through the details. When we come up with our recommendations, based off of all this information that we collected, what we do is say, okay, the traditional ones certainly, but what are some of the new offerings that GSA are developing now or could be in the future? Or maybe it informs offerings that we haven't thought of yet. And if it's something you're interested in, we can explore those too. To help it, GSA figured that we were going to be having these conversations, and we really wanted to learn from the pandemic and as far as different ways of working. And so what we did, and then I believe there was a CES session on this as well a couple months ago, did something called the Workplace 2030. You may hear it as Workplace 2030 Initiative, and basically it's an effort of GSA and in consultation with our client agencies, as well as our consulting partners, to say, okay, what are the trends that are coming and how can we prepare for them and better accommodate our clients? And so what you see here is the brainstorm list of if you will, of all the different suite of services that we think would be fantastic to have available to our clients. But of course, we can't do them all at once. And so we prioritize them based off of the impact that we felt it would have for our clients, a sense of urgency, and of course, ease of implementation. And out of that, we came up with 3 overall offerings, something called FlexHub, the ability to reconfigurable prototypes that allow our client agencies to experience different types of working, such as from furniture, not just see it on a screen, as well as something called Home Office in a Box. The first one is the co-working offering. One of them that's available now is something called flexible co-working services. It is an IDIQ contract with firms such as WeWork and a few others. And basically what you're doing is you're securing space as a service. It doesn't require an occupancy agreement, and allows you to reserve a workstation for an individual or an office for a very limited amount of time. What we're also doing is the federal version of that called FlexHub. And FlexHub is developing where we're essentially providing the same service, reservation, as far as the billing and the whole experience from your perspective, from our client's perspective. But for us, we're serving that role. One of the nice things about it, what gets me excited, is that because it's in federal facilities, it takes care of some of the security preferences that many of our agencies have as far as coming into the building. And it also creates opportunities for doing shared spaces among those agencies that have comparable technology or access control requirements. Lots of exciting things. And what we're doing is we're bundling that with something called Workplace Innovation Lab. I talked about earlier about reconfigurable prototypes, basically a way for you or clients to experience different types of workstation or office furniture configurations, as well as the technology to support that. We're working on building that. We're going to be building that soon at our headquarters in Washington, D.C. And at the same time, we're also going to be fine-tuning the back-end processes, if you will, related to providing FlexHub. So all of this is going to be happening basically late spring, early summerish or so. And when those are available, you can expect to see another CES session about that and a lot of information about that coming soon. The other offering that's in development is something called Home Office in a Box. What that essentially is taking the offerings that our Federal Acquisition Service already provides and bundling those to make it much easier for clients or individuals to say, I want to be able to get this type of chair and I need a new laptop, and basically bundle it together and order it in a manner that's compliant with your agency requirements. So there are some setup infrastructure, back-end processes related to that we need to get set up, and that's something that we expect to have available at the end of this fiscal year. And so more information to come on that. However, even though some of this is in development, that's not stopping us from investigating to what extent those might be viable strategies for our clients when we do these workplace engagements. The last thing I want to cover is some of the services related to change management, and just real briefly, because a lot of this, the tools, doing focus groups, employee surveys, talking with leadership and employees and getting all that information, looking at all these different variables that go into an effective workplace, much of that is just an engagement overall is change management as well. Change management is something that it does two things. One of them, and it helps minimize risk. It helps you minimize risk with respect to, I forgot about this, or maybe you do a workplace change and you think it'll work well for everyone, but there's significant employee resistance to that. Then there's a risk associated with reversion or changing those workplace approaches that you started with. So if we start early, just like when we start a workplace engagement, and we start thinking about the workplace change and how the steps the organization's leaders can take to guide that organization to the new workplace, not only does it help minimize the risk of changes downstream, if you will, which could be considerably a lot more costly. What it also does is it helps address any potential fears that the individuals may have about what their new workplace could be or their new working conditions. So what you see here is a curve I like to use, an emotional response curve, to basically change. And so one of the things that sort of, and I'm not going to do a poll or on this or a chat, but just as you look at it is when you think about going back to the office, where do you lie as individuals is on this curve, and what types of things can happen as far as preparing you better to go back to the new workplace, or if it's just a workplace change overall. Change management is helping an organization and the individuals go up that curve so things become more the cultural norm, the new way of working, the new normal, if you will. Some ways that we might do that when we develop our change management strategies with the client, maybe ways of trying out the change. For instance, like our workplace innovation lab, it's kind of like change management because you're allowed to basically reserve a spot, a different type of workstation, maybe your employees can try it out, and they can experience it. So if you use that type of furniture, that configuration or technology, and you use that on your own, they're more familiar with it. And so maybe it's going to be less of a concern as far as when it comes to the fear of what that change can entail. Different types of incentives or disincentives to encourage change or employees to adopt the new change to get them as far as trying new things out. We talked about some of the incentives in the chat. Some of you had some fantastic ideas. All of them are fantastic, actually. As far as what are ways to attract new talent and to retain the talent that we already have. That's all change management. And maybe it's simple as coming up with education approaches to form as far as employees or staff, learning new technology or how to work in a distributed organization. One thing to always keep in mind is that as technology changes and we use new things like Zoom in this instance or virtual whiteboards, there has to be an education component as well as time for the individuals to get familiar and comfortable with that. So those are all the different types of services that GSA can offer you. It's a bunch here. I do encourage you to take a look at some of the activity-based publication that I referenced earlier. If you want to get the free copies of those Excel tools, both the workplace investment and feasibility modeling tool or the space calculation tool, you can email me at workplace@gsa.gov. If you're interested in any of these services, you got a variety of different ways to reach out to us. You can reach out at a regional level. What you see there are regional workplace executives all across the land. And then, of course, again, you can always, for any national assistance, or if you're looking at big portfolio changes, policy changes, anything like that, or you're just curious to see what's going on in the industry or what the future may hold, by all means, reach out to us at workplace@gsa.gov. So with that, I think that's it. So with that, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to if there's any more questions.
All right, excellent. We do have a few more questions in the pod here, so I'll go ahead and start reading those off. Number one, Tatiana asks, do you envision a process facilitating change of agencies' design guidelines and in view of the trends that you talked about?
Yes, thank you for your question. We actually do something like that at the national level. We call them national engagements. National engagements, and engagements really is about engaging the entire organization about what the new workplace could be and providing advice on how to get there. National engagements looks at overall, and those would be very typically things like design guidelines, maybe policies with regards to remote work. Maybe it's about investigating different ways of measuring workplace efficiency and effectiveness. We have done design guidelines before, developed kit of parts, if you will, from the design perspective. And it's something very much in our wheelhouse, and we've done those for many agencies as well. There's a couple different ways we can do that. We can start a conversation and look at, you can reach out to us again at workplace@gsa.gov to just talk about maybe might look at a national perspective. Or another way that we're finding particularly effective, if you think about dramatic changes, is maybe doing something at a more local or regional scale, seeing how well that works out. Maybe some things worked, maybe some things didn't work out quite right. And then using that to inform national strategies as well. So regardless of the approach, or if you're just generally interested, again, give us a holler and we'd be happy to talk through some potential services.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Heidi asks, when and where can we get this WIFM tool, or is it only provided by GSA when a project begins?
It is provided by GSA when anybody sends me an email. It's actually something that all you gotta do is send me an email. It isn't downloadable. Partly because we're going to do a big upgrade to it, if anything, to tone down the color scheme, which is a bit garish. And I could say that because I developed the tool. Is that if you're interested, I can give it to you. One thing to keep in mind is that, and you don't need to have GSA use the tool. This is something you can have and use on your own. You could freely share it with your own consulting firms, your AE, for instance. There are some parts that are locked down that I can't open up. Particularly around the cost estimating methodology. But there are other aspects, many aspects that we can customize for you to make it work better. It is intended to be used before requirements development. So to go back to, sorry about going back to slide, but it's a little bit easier to visualize, where it says that start here right there in big green, sort of tilted off that way to the left. WIFM would be actually used at the very beginning of that pre-design. It's something that you would use to say, oh, is this theoretically possible and what might it look like? And once you have a scenario that you think that, okay, we're headed in the right direction, then what you can do is use the detailed calculations that are also automatically provided and use that to start your more formal program of requirements, if you will, or POR efforts. So think of it as a way of jump starting requirements development. But you can get a copy of the tool. All you gotta do is send me an email. Yeah.
All right. Does ROM afford different locality rates?
Yes, so the cost estimating on the rough order of magnitude, again, big swings, plus or minus 25%. Part of that is because it's not based off of actual space requirements. It's based off of a lot of assumptions on things like support spaces, if you will. However, it does take into account locality adjustment and seismic adjustment, as well as a bunch of other things as well. The reason why locality adjustment is important is even though it is a rough order of magnitude type of estimate, the swings depending on the locality could be quite dramatic. As you can maybe imagine, if you're building like a data center in Hawaii or someplace else, it'll show you what the cost difference is associated with that. Yeah.
All right. Would it be possible in the future to have a training on the space tool?
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's just for client enrichment series or for you yourself.
Well, I wouldn't subject everyone to, well, it'd have to be a very specific client. It does get into the weeds a bit as far as the math. So you gotta, but what it is yes. So just like WIFM, what you could do, or you could do both, is that I'll send you, if you're interested, send me an email. What we would do is schedule a time to do a demo of the tool. What we would do is walk through the user interface, both of them, exactly the same approach. Walk through the interface, and if there's any parts that you want to customize, we can talk about that as well. We can even do both tools at the same time if you're interested in both. Typically, a WIFM demonstration takes about 90 minutes because it's a bit more complicated as far as the back-end calculations. But the space calculation tool, the work pattern space calculator, the one I showed later on, that one is a lot more straightforward, and that one really is just a half an hour tutorial.
Nice.
Yeah.
And the final question we have for right now is, would you please review services you provide at a charge?
At a charge. So pretty much all of the services with the exception of the Excel tools that I mentioned, WIFM and the space calculator, as well as most pre-occupancy surveys, because we have those surveys set up and it's really easy for us to deploy them out to other agencies. Pretty much everything else is on a reimbursable basis. Much of that has to do is because the types of services or the steps necessary to come up with the recommendations can vary significantly depending on agency, on goals. What we found also is that if an agency doesn't have the funding to cover an entire engagement, and certainly we will come up with estimates for you on what it would cost, is oftentimes we can do part of that, saying maybe just the survey part or the research part, and maybe the agency needs some time to digest the results. Maybe things are changing in the mission, and then come back later as far as some of the other more recommendations, if you will. Lots of different flexibilities and approaches. Pretty much meet most budgets out there. The other thing that we found is with the agency funding this by RWA is that those organizations tend to be much more invested in the process and in the outcome, and a much higher likelihood that the recommendations that we co-create together are used on your agency once GSA's role is finished.
Related question from
Yep.
Suzanne, same person.
Mhm.
Is the cost based on a percentage?
No, the cost base is basically we build it up from scratch. What we do is unless it's like a really small organization or something like the survey that we have templates for, we could easily deploy. Most of the time we hire a consultant. The consultant are the firms that I showed earlier. And then the consultant, what we do is like if you hired an architect engineer type of thing, where it's like types of steps, each of those research tools requires a certain amount of hours to accomplish, some time to digest the data, some time to go through deliverables, all that kinds of things. So we build up the estimate from scratch. I'm always hesitant to give out like a dollar per square foot type of thing, or a percent. But if you need some ballpark figures as far as, again, order of magnitude, rounded to the nearest 10,000, if you will, then I would say, again, reach out to us, and then we can kind of, we talk about what you're looking for, and we can come up with a really rough budget estimate, if you will.
All right, well, thank you very much. With that last question, we will wrap up today's presentation. Ryan, thank you very much for your expertise and your insight on the elements of workplace engagement and all the questions you've answered. And I'd also like to thank all of you, our clients, who were able to join us and engage with the material. We hope you enjoyed and found this presentation very useful. We will post formal written responses to the questions and comments posted in the Q&A panel as a frequently asked questions document for future reference on our website, gsa.gov/CES. We host these client enrichment presentations each month and cover a wide range of topics. Each presentation is led by an expert on the subject and can provide anywhere from a basic overview of a topic to a more advanced deep dive into the nitty-gritty. Two of our upcoming sessions are listed right here. Online leasing tools, changing the ways we do business on Tuesday, March 8th, and policy and process changes for occupancy agreements on Tuesday, April 5th. We hope you'll be able to join us. To learn more about the Client Enrichment Series as a whole, please sign up at our website, gsa.gov/CES. The goal of the Client Enrichment Series is to engage our audience in workplace topics that contribute to your mission success and to your effective management of your real estate and workplace programs. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.